and thank you for joining Growing Tech Fast. This is Org3D's podcast where we talk about growing tech startups with those who have helped grow them. Today, I'm joined by Angela. It's great to have you on the podcast today. How are you doing?
I am doing well. Thank you so much for having me. Glad to be here.
No, I'm really excited to hear more about Photon Commerce and the work you're doing there. So it'd be great to start with that. Can you tell our listeners a little bit more about yourself and the work you're doing?
Absolutely. So I'll dive into Photon Commerce first and then talk a little bit about myself. Photon Commerce is an artificial intelligence company that uses AI and natural language processing to do what's called intelligent document understanding. So if you are someone who has been following anything to do with ChatGPT in the last several weeks, we are essentially adjacent to that technology in the AI space, but for financial documents. So think any bill you want to pay, any invoice your business has to deal with, a check. Our AI can be the intelligent document understanding engine to reduce the time it takes for you to enter in all those bills. So it's super helpful for a variety of use cases. I've been there almost 2 years, which is it's wild for me to say that, but I think, in this kind of post-lockdown, post-COVID world, time's kind of mushy anyway. As far as me and my background, I have been in the fintech industry for approximately 5 years. Most of that has been in payments specifically. Started out at TrevaPay. I have some experience in e-commerce implementations with Salesforce, Magento, which is now Adobe. And then what I really try to explain to people about my role in the fintech industry is that I focus on strategy and insight. And those two things in fintech are incredibly important in terms of communicating the value of new technology, but also helping people understand how it affects them on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely. Great. Okay. And tell me a little bit more about some of your favorite things about working for Photon.
Well, one of the things that is really great for me is I'm really strong as a remote worker. When the lockdown happened and everybody had to go home, I didn't have a problem. I have my Ph.D. in rhetoric from the University of Kansas, which is highly self-directed. Anybody out there who has a terminal degree or even a master's degree recognizes that you have to do your work and nobody's going to sit over your shoulder and make sure that you write your dissertation. So I had only been out of my PhD program for a couple of years when the lockdown happened. So I just went back to form and created my office space for anyone who can see it when they're with me on Zoom. There's hallmarks of literature that I love. My alma mater, KU. I'm a Jayhawk, so Rock Chalk, to those of you out there who might know that reference. And I also really like being on the cutting edge of industry technology and technology that I believe solves practical problems in the real world for people and businesses. I think that it's important for us to look at the barriers to growing companies. What are the barriers to people having access to capital and being able to pay their bills and to understand their personal cash flow? And so when I think about those types of technology, that's what makes me really excited to be at Photon, is because I get to educate people on what's new now and next in a meaningful way.
Nice. Love it. And how did you jump from doing your PhD to going into the fintech space? Where did that happen and how?
I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do when I left my program. I generally was being tracked toward being in the nonprofit sector because that's what happens a lot of times when you have a degree in the humanities in general. You either are tracked into a teaching role or you were tracked into working for a nonprofit. And nonprofit wasn't for me. So I spent some time interviewing people that were long-term career, very far ahead of me in their careers. Some had already retired, and just asked them what they would do if they were in my position. If they had the resume that I have, where would they point themselves? Where would they point their career? And after those informational interviews, I came to the terms strategy and insight, and then spent a few months on LinkedIn applying for every job I could find that had strategy in the title. So
Nice.
if Reid Hoffman hears this, come interview me, because both of my jobs that I got in fintech, I got on LinkedIn.
I love that.
So yeah, that was
Yeah,
it. It was LinkedIn.
helpful platform as always. Okay, nice. Um, and then okay, let's go on to talk a little bit more about the startup world and startup life. So are there any particular moments in your career where you feel it's triggered a change in your thinking and approach to startup life?
Probably a few, honestly. When I was at TrevaPay, that was a company that had 600 people
Hmm.
in their employ, and they were at the time owned by a large international corporation. But the team that I was working on and the product that I was working on was like a startup within that larger organization. So
Hmm.
I got to learn a lot of meaningful lessons about corporate life and how to work within corporate life, but then also how to apply some of those skills into the startup world.
Hmm.
A lot of times in working in a startup, you have to wear multiple hats at the same time, and there isn't necessarily a roadmap. I was just on a call this morning with a mentor talking about how in my career trajectory so far, I'm still struggling to find what the roadmap is and try to avoid the pitfalls that some serial entrepreneurs have shared in their stories, and to be kind of a strong team player. And I will say that one of the key moments that kind of changed my perspective and helped me see the potential that there is in working at a startup is the first time I went to Money 2020 in the US. I didn't realize that there were so many people in the technology sector. I live in the Midwest in the States. So there's not a ton of tech investment out here. There is more now since the lockdown. A lot of people have relocated because of the cost of living.
Hmm.
But going to Money 2020 and seeing the inherent potential in working at a startup and working at a technology company, and seeing the hunger that people have to make the world a better place using technology, that like fundamentally changed me and made me realize this is my career, this is what I want to do, this is where I want to go.
Yeah. And I guess would you give any advice to someone who is currently at a bigger company and is looking at the startup world and is maybe thinking, oh, do I, don't I? What advice would you give them?
Step one, go for it.
Yeah,
uh, there's always going to be a large corporate out there that is seeking talent in one way or another. If you're somebody who wants to diversify your skill set, who wants to give yourself a new challenge, who thinks that there might be something more out there for you and is looking to grow, working at a startup is a great way to do that. There's more room to negotiate.
hmm,
There's the ability to take on additional projects. So my title at Photon is Vice President of Business Development, but I'm not in just a strictly sales role. I create our entire go-to-market strategy. I'm responsible for our marketing content. And I wouldn't necessarily get that opportunity if I was in a business development role within a corporate environment. So I say go for it. Find something you're passionate about and message the founder on LinkedIn, because that's what I did. And he responded back to me.
for
Do a
sure.
little bit of research about the product and see if it's something that you feel like you can contribute some ideas to.
For sure. I completely agree. I mean, wearing multiple hats in a startup, being able to do multiple roles at the same time is going to give you so many more skills than doing one specific role.
Mm-hmm.
So absolutely great advice. Um, okay, this is probably my favorite question, and I ask it on every episode I do. Um, if you could go back and talk to your 20-year-old self, um, and give yourself advice, um, not necessarily change something, but just give yourself advice, what would you tell yourself?
I would probably tell myself to be more confident in the journey that I was taking.
Mhm.
Uh, I was, I mean, a lot of 20-year-olds can be kind of confused as to what they want to do with their lives. And I was starting my master's program at the time. So I graduated college at 20.
Mhm.
and then was figuring out what to do next. And so I ended up taking a gap year and I went and worked in South Korea for a year,
Wow.
which is completely unheard of for people in the States that we don't do gap years. So I kind of did this
Right.
international thing where I did a gap year and didn't know what it was. And then I met a bunch of people from the UK and Australia and
Yeah.
realized that everybody else does this and we don't.
Yeah.
Um, but I was really lacking confidence at the time. The economy had bottomed out. I had a degree in creative writing and I realized that I wasn't sure I wanted to be a writer, but I would definitely tell myself to trust myself, to have confidence in my vision, and to know that I have and had the support system that I needed to be as successful as I wanted to be. So it's a little bit of trust the process, but it's
Mm-hmm.
also trust yourself.
Love that. I love that phrase. We use that so much at Org3D, like trust the process. Like as long as you're doing all the steps you need to get to your destination,
Hmm.
whatever that destination might be, it will be okay. So I love that mindset. Interesting that you don't do gap years in the US that much. Like I didn't know that, and they're so popular over here. I suppose after doing that gap year, did you regret it, or was it a good decision? What do you think on reflection?
It was probably one of the best things that I've ever done. It was a
Nice.
snap decision made by a 20-year-old that needed something different to do
Hmm.
in a market, in an economy where everyone that was a 20-year career veteran of anything lost their job. So
Hmm.
there was no work, there was no money, the housing market crashed. It was just a disaster. And so I had to make a choice of, do I take this massive risk and see what happens? And it paid off.
Yeah,
Even if it didn't, and even if I had failed, there's a plane ticket home and I could have gone home and I could have figured out something different.
exactly.
And so I basically, my parents were super supportive. I really appreciated that, but it was also for work. So I didn't get, the more traditional gap year experience where you kind of are a bit of a nomad, which I
Yeah.
totally would have loved. But I did that. I did that in my mid 20s. I did that in my mid 20s over one summer, and it was great. But I definitely don't regret it. That international experience really opened my eyes to is a what's possible around the world, and
Yeah.
it's like intercultural communication and how important it is to understand people from where they are.
Yeah.
And oh my gosh, it was one of my favorite things. I actually, a couple of weeks ago was my birthday, and I asked my friends on social media if they would tell me one of their favorite memories of me. And one of the people that I initially met when I went to South Korea, he talked about a memory of the first week that we met when we got
Oh,
there. So we're still friends. There's a core pod of us that are still friends from that cohort of teachers.
yeah.
And it's just so great to have those memories and to see kind of how we've all changed in the last, oh my gosh, it's almost 13. It'll be 13 years in August since I met all of them. That's wild.
For sure. I think it's so important because there's definitely not that there's anything wrong with that, but there's definitely a push to constantly know what you want to do at a young age and know what the next step is, and you're encouraged to never take a break and just take a step back and think, okay, I need a year doing something different, and then
Mhm.
I might know better. And that sounds like it was the case for you, which is amazing. I love that.
Yes, I definitely agree. And it ties into a little bit of the trust the process
Yeah.
comment from earlier, where I think, 20, 30 years ago, there was a little bit more of a prescriptive format in terms of how people went about their careers.
Hmm.
And that is simply no longer the case. If you look at millennials and Gen Z in particular,
Yeah.
we're going to have a lot more of a dynamic journey and understanding what we want to do in our lives. And I think that we're going to see, especially now on social media with TikTok and Instagram, we're seeing
Hmm.
people in these different iterations where before people said, you change jobs like 5 to 7 times in your career, maybe. And
Hmm.
we're going to see that live and in real time. I mean, people have seen me throughout my 20s. I was in academia and then I went into fintech, and who knows what I'm going to be doing in 20 years. I may be on an advisory board somewhere, or I may be scuba diving in New Zealand.
Yeah.
Um, but I think it's important for especially if there are younger people that are listening to this, to know that there is no right answer and there is no right choice. This is something that I give out as advice all the time to people. When you're making a decision, there is no quote right decision. There is a decision. You will assign value to that decision later based on the outcome,
Mm-hmm.
but all you're doing is making a decision with the information that you have at the time. And whether
Yeah.
it ends up in success or failure, that doesn't change what you're doing within that process. So maybe depressurize that a little bit,
Yeah.
and understand that everything is a learning experience.
100%. Now going off that, we talked a little bit on our first call, Angela, about women in tech and women in fintech specifically, and this is something I know you're passionate about too. So talk to me about what you've learned as a woman in fintech, and I guess on reflection, advice you'd give to young women who are entering the industry.
Oh man, we have an hour, right? Um,
Might take a while, yeah.
I I just got off a call this morning with somebody who's a mentor of mine, and she looks like me, which is
Okay.
rare in this industry. I was blessed when I took my first job in fintech to report directly to a woman who became a part of the C-suite while I was reporting to her.
Wow.
And she's been in the industry 20, 25 years at this point, probably 25 now. And so I got to see firsthand how she handled being in that role. And I also noticed that there just were not a lot of people that looked like me across the industry, in industry publications, at conferences. I was by far the youngest person there. I'd see three other women and do the wave and keep walking because I didn't know how to even approach somebody
Of
in
course.
that format. And I would have thought that by year 5, we would be a little bit further along in
Mm,
terms of women representation in not only fintech, but also in the C suite. So if you look at the data, we're still at single percentage points of women's representation in board seats and in the C suite, in tech, in startups, across the board. And that's just not acceptable. If anything, what we know is that a diversity of perspectives is what creates success within companies. And
yeah.
you can find data on that literally anywhere. It doesn't matter what country you're in, it doesn't matter what industry you're in. When you have a diversity of perspectives at that table, you're able to critique ideas in a better way and understand how to drive your strategy forward and to execute on that strategy. And that's something that I've noticed in my own life. For women that are, considering joining fintech or considering even joining the payments industry, which a lot of people think payments is boring. It's not.
No.
It is not a boring industry. If you think payments is boring, that's just because you've been listening to somebody with an MBA that don't listen to them. Listen to me.
Yeah.
I know.
I agree.
there
I'm all for payments.
there's so much opportunity here, and there's so much opportunity to grow, and there are programs now for women in tech that are helping us build those coalitions across industries and across companies. So there's women in fintech, there's women in payments, there's pay tech women. And I will also say something for Money 2020. So I went to Money 2020 this past year in the US. It's held in Las Vegas. And the
Mhm.
CEO of Money 2020 is a woman. Her name is Tracy Davies. And her critical key strategic project for Money 2020 is to have 50% women speakers on stage.
Love it.
That is a data driven goal for the largest technology conference in the world. Like, we need more people doing that. Like, if you're a man listening to this is an opportunity. It is a key opportunity for you and whatever role you're in your organization, to be a mentor, to set clear, actionable goals about gender equality within your organization and diversity. It's an opportunity. It is a revenue driver,
Hmm.
and it's a great way to create more opportunities within your organization.
For sure.
So yeah, those are kind of my perspectives. And also, I'm just going to touch on this because I saw data on it yesterday and it's really irritating. that in 2022, the gender pay gap is still real. They evaluated women's pay across the board, and women made 83% of the salaries that men made. And that literally just came out yesterday for data on 2022. So also, if you are somebody who is in power, whether you're a man or a woman, and you have people who report to you, talk about their salaries, make sure that there's parity in their salaries,
Yeah.
and advocate for them, go to bat for them. It's really important. And it's important for you to teach them how to advocate for themselves as well.
100%. I mean, that is crazy. In 2022, I have no words. But yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I mean, like you say, there's so many different groups now, like women in fintech and women in paytech that can make you feel included. And yeah, I'm all for it. Any women wanting to get into paytech.
And if you have questions for me, if you're somebody who's listening to this and you have questions for me, you can follow me in all of my projects. I will talk to you. I will point you in the direction of resources. I know who helped me get to where I am now. And I am a firm believer that if somebody opens a door for you, you turn around, you turn the light on in the room behind you, grab someone's hand and you pull them with you.
Love that. And you're the payments Elsa as well, so
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I couldn't not mention that because I love it.
Yes,
Do you
I'll
want
be
to
having some
explain?
video. Yeah, that's a funny story of how that happens. And it comes from, so obviously for people who cannot see me, you can find me Payments Elsa on LinkedIn, and I will be dropping some videos here in the next several weeks about payments expertise. But this actually came up, it's pretty close to a year ago that this moniker came to fruition. I was speaking at a conference in Disney World on AI and payments, and I was on a panel, and I have long blonde hair. Some of it's purple, but most of it's blonde. And I was talking with some bankers in passing about my remarks, and they were asking me questions, and I was pointing them in the direction of how banks and fintechs can work together to innovate on behalf of their clients and drive revenue. And they, because we were in Disney World, I think, looked at me in the middle of this conversation and said, "What are you, like Payments Elsa or something?" And I was like, "Oh, maybe that could be who I am. Maybe that's a good professional moniker or identity." And it just kind of stuck.
I
And
like
so
it.
now it's just there and it's part of my branding, and it's kind of fun. I mean, in my personal life, I love to sing show tunes. I used to be heavily
But
involved in the theater scene. My career and theater don't get along right now in terms of timing,
yeah,
but I love to sing and do all of that. So I'm sure that that was also part of it. There was one night of karaoke. So it's a
love
fun moniker to
that.
have. And I think I'm going to keep it.
I
Honestly,
think so. I
I
love
think I'm
it.
going to keep it.
The braid definitely helps today as well.
Oh
It's a
yeah.
very Elsa braid. So that's brilliant. I'm all for it. I wish I had some identity that was something to do with Disney or
Oh
I'm
my
not
gosh,
sure.
I've been
I'll have to
wanting it.
think.
I've been wanting one forever. I've been wanting a nickname since I was like in junior high. So I feel like I finally arrived.
I love it. Okay, so on to sort of the final part of the podcast, and I really want to talk about who your role models are and why. So yeah.
Role models. Whew. Okay. I have several, but I can kind of point to role models in different areas and it'll give you a picture of how I view myself and the type of person that I want to be. One of my role models is for sure Tracy Davies from Money 2020. She is super smart. She is one of the kindest people you will ever meet. She, for as much as she's done in the industry, for the level of experience that she has, and for the respect that she garners when she walks into a room, she's the most down to earth person I've ever met. And I really hope that someday I can affect the types of change that she's been able to affect, and also maintain that level of humility and that drive to make the world a better place. She really is just an amazing person, and you should definitely follow her on LinkedIn. Um,
I'm going to after this as well.
um, Another person that I think is absolutely amazing and I look up to is Arlen Hamilton. Her podcast is called Your First Million. Her book is called It's About Damn Time. She is a Black woman venture capitalist, and she bootstrapped her entire VC while she was on food stamps. She listened to whatever she has to say. She's amazing. She's on Twitter, she's on Instagram, she has her podcast is fantastic. She interviews a wide range of founders and serial entrepreneurs, and she's also BFS with Mark Cuban now. So she's definitely legit.
Yeah.
So definitely follow her. And
She
then
sounds great.
oh, she's awesome. Oh my gosh, she's so awesome. If I ever get to meet her, I will fangirl and probably faint.
Hopefully.
And then this is probably going to be slightly embarrassing to her when I actually have her listen to this, but I also have to say that like one of my biggest role models is probably like my parents combined,
Yeah.
because uh, they never asked me to shrink who I am. It growing up in a rural area where the expectations were set at, you know, family and kids and being in that more traditional mindset, I didn't really fit that. And they knew that. And they didn't ask me to be anything other than who I was. But they also showed me how valuable it is to work hard and to be kind to other people. And I feel like sometimes that can get lost in translation when you become successful. You forget where you came from, you forget how hard you worked. And I don't want to lose that. And I think that's why I have this really clear vision in terms of like bringing people behind me and bringing people with me in terms of success, because it is not easy to do what I have done to get to where I am. And I don't want people to struggle like that. And
Yeah.
so I look up to my parents so much because of the energy that they bring into the world and the kindness that they bring into the world. And the fact that like they never stop wanting people to have better no matter what.
That's amazing. And that's really inspiring as well. Go your parents.
They're awesome. If everybody could have my parents, the world would be such a much better place. Like,
Exactly. Well, I think that's my last question. I have to say, this has been so fun and so interesting, and I've really loved hearing everything about you. I think it's been a pleasure speaking to you, Angela. So thank you for sharing your wisdom.
yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. As I said earlier, if anyone who is listening to this wants to follow me or any of my projects, please feel free to follow me on LinkedIn. I'm under Payments Elsa, or I also write for a couple of industry publications. But generally speaking, if you find me on LinkedIn, all of my content's there, and you can listen to more of what I think about the payments industry, what I think about women in tech, what I think about humanities in tech, and if you have questions, just don't hesitate to reach out.
Nice. I'll put all of those links in the LinkedIn post that we make. So if you're looking
Super.
for Angela's profile, it will be linked. Cool. Well, thank you to everyone listening as well. Tune in next time for Growing Tech Fast. Bye.